The first time I saw Dr. Celine Varick, she was glaring at the impossibility of the thing I had just finished assembling. The lab was cavernous, walls lined with humming reactors and banks of blinking consoles, the kind of place where the air smelled faintly of ozone and burnt metal. I was perched on a scaffolding platform, adjusting the final flux conduit on the prototype quantum interlink device, and she was standing on the observation deck above, arms crossed and expression as cold and sharp as the starlight filtering through the reinforced viewport. "You can't do it," she said, her voice cutting through the low hum of machinery like a scalpel. "No one has ever stabilized a temporal entanglement field outside a controlled vacuum. The mathematics alone." "I already did," I replied, not bothering to look up. My hands moved with practiced precision, tightening the last nanobolts and aligning the field emitters with sub-millimeter accuracy. The interlink thrummed under my fingers, and the faint shimmer of a quantum ripple shimmered around the central core. Celine frowned, stepping closer. She was brilliant, one of the few minds who could rival mine, and for good reason. She had spent her life attempting what no one else dared. And now, apparently, she couldn't fathom that someone else had succeeded where she had failed. "You already did?" she asked, her tone incredulous. "That's impossible. Only if you insist on following the old assumptions," I said, finally stepping back to admire my work. "I broke a few of the rules, yes, but look." I pressed a sequence on the console, and the interlink device blinked with a soft cerulean glow. The air shimmered as though the room itself were breathing. Celine's eyes widened. Her disbelief was palpable, but beneath it flickered something else. Curiosity, that dangerous trait that always drives people to risk everything in pursuit of the unknown. "You didn't just stabilize it," she murmured. "You bypassed the entanglement collapse threshold entirely." I nodded. "I used a self-reinforcing quantum feedback loop. Essentially, I let the particles negotiate their own coherence instead of forcing it. It's elegant in its simplicity." She crossed her arms tighter. "Elegant, maybe. Safe? I wouldn't bet my life on it." "Then don't," I said, letting the words hang between us. There was always a tension between her cautious intellect and my reckless ingenuity. And yet, that friction is what had always pushed both of us forward. I activated the interlink fully, and the room dimmed as the device drew on its power reserves. The shimmer intensified, and a low, resonant hum filled the lab. Tiny motes of light, like microscopic stars, began to spiral around the core, twisting and weaving in patterns too complex for any human mind to follow. Celine stepped closer despite herself, the scientist in her unable to resist witnessing history in the making. "Temporal displacement," she whispered. "Not just displacement," I corrected. "Transposition. We're not just sending matter forward or backward. We're reordering causality itself. In principle, we can experiment with potential outcomes, test probabilities, observe futures without touching the past." Celine's jaw tightened. "That's revolutionary. And terrifying." I smiled. "Exactly why you said it couldn't be done." The next week passed in a blur of calculations, simulations, and guarded demonstrations. The device became our obsession. The moment I had stabilized the field, everything else, funding, fame, recognition, felt secondary. We were on the brink of something monumental. Celine, of course, tried to dissuade me from pushing the boundaries. But my caution, while present, had a different flavor. I wasn't reckless. I was willing to take calculated risks. She, on the other hand, feared consequences, paradoxes, and the kind of catastrophic failures that would erase a career or worse, a timeline. The first experiment was simple: a single object, a steel cube, transposed into a potential future timeline 30 minutes ahead. We observed it vanish from our reality. the field rippling around its last position. 30 minutes later, the cube materialized in exactly the predicted spot, pristine and unchanged. Celine was incredulous. You actually did it, she said. Not just theoretically, but practically. You've created a controlled causal loop. And that's just the beginning, I said. She stayed late that night, reviewing the data with me. Normally, Celine would leave the lab at precisely 2,200 hours, but tonight she lingered. Her mind raced with possibilities, her curiosity a wildfire I hadn't seen fully unleashed before. Have you considered testing? She started, then hesitated. Her voice dropped. Human subjects? I raised an eyebrow. You mean temporal transposition on living tissue? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Potentially, yes. For observation, research. I want to know what could happen. I leaned back in my chair. That's the kind of thinking that gets people killed, or worse, erased from existence. Her eyes met mine, fierce and unyielding. If it can be done, we have a duty to try. I shook my head, laughing softly. You always were braver than you should be. 2 weeks later, we were ready for the first live trial. The subject was a volunteer android, a humanoid construct, capable of sentience, but without the fragility of organic life. Its consciousness interfaced with our device, allowing us to observe how complex systems responded to temporal transposition. Celine monitored the quantum feedback loops while I activated the interlink. The room pulsed with an electric blue glow, and I held my breath. Time dilated around the android. Its atoms shimmered, fragmented into probability waves, and then coalesced in a pattern that was both foreign and familiar. The interlink stabilized, and the android blinked, as though waking from a long dream. It worked, Celine whispered. Her hand trembled slightly as she noted the readings. Absolutely worked. I allowed myself a small smile. I told you it could be done. Her gaze met mine, and for the first time, there was no doubt, no skepticism, only awe. And I realized a quiet rivalry, the kind that drives humanity to greatness. Let's see how it handles more complex inputs, I said. And so, we pushed further. Objects, organisms, even sequences of events, all tested and transposed. With each success, Celine's astonishment grew, and her initial doubt gave way to a kind of admiration that bordered on respect. But as with all great experiments, there were consequences. The first anomaly appeared 2 weeks after our live trials. A minor discrepancy in the temporal feedback, a faint echo of events that hadn't yet occurred in our reality. At first, it was subtle. A glass tipped over without contact, a console flickered in a pattern inconsistent with the logs. Celine frowned. Causality isn't supposed to behave like this. I nodded gravely. We're not just observing futures. We're interacting with them. Each transposition leaves a residue, a temporal fingerprint. Over the next few days, these echoes became more pronounced. Conversations we hadn't had yet repeated themselves. Objects appeared and disappeared with no discernible pattern, and worst of all, the interlink began emitting unstable pulses that threatened to collapse the field entirely. You pushed too far, Celine said one evening, her face pale under the harsh lab lights. This could destroy the coherence of our reality if it escalates. I'm aware, I admitted, but there's a way to stabilize it. I just need cooperation. She nodded slowly. We'll do it together. But we proceed with extreme caution. For the next 3 days, we worked in tandem, recalibrating the interlink, reinforcing the quantum loops, and rewriting the algorithms that govern the feedback field. It was exhausting, mentally and physically. But finally, the interlink hummed steadily again. The temporal ripples harmonized into a perfect, controlled resonance. Celine leaned against a console, staring at the glowing device. "You really did it," she said softly. "You didn't just think outside the box, you annihilated the box entirely." I chuckled. "I had some help. From your skepticism, primarily." She smirked, finally allowing herself a rare, genuine smile. "And yet, you still beat me at my own game." There was silence then, not uncomfortable, but full of unspoken understanding. We were pioneers, yes, but more importantly, we were witnesses to a new frontier of reality, one where human ingenuity could flirt with godlike creation and survive. The final test came unexpectedly. A sudden surge of energy from a nearby quantum starfield created a spontaneous temporal distortion in the lab. The interlink, already finely tuned, absorbed the surge effortlessly, stabilizing the field with an elegance even I hadn't anticipated. Celine's eyes widened in astonishment. "You didn't just stabilize it, you adapted it in real time." I shrugged, feeling the exhaustion of weeks of relentless experimentation weighing on me. "I already had done it, even before you thought it impossible." She laughed, a sound of pure disbelief and exhilaration. "You arrogant fool. You've changed everything." I grinned. "Not changed, Celine. Expanded. The universe is bigger than we imagined, and we've just started exploring it." And in that moment, standing amidst the hum of the interlink, the shimmering lights, and the quiet after the storm of quantum chaos, I realized something profound. The impossible is just a challenge waiting for someone foolish or brave enough to attempt it. And perhaps the greatest discovery isn't the machine, or the science, or the transposed realities. It's knowing that someone else once told you it couldn't be done, and you did it anyway. Celine looked at me, and for the first time, her eyes held not doubt, but genuine awe. "Next time, maybe I'll try before you do." I laughed. "You're welcome to try. But remember, someone has to be first." And as the hum of the interlink echoed into the night, I knew that this was only the beginning. The interlink thrummed steadily, its cerulean glow bathing the lab in soft light. After weeks of pushing the boundaries of physics and reality itself, Celine and I finally stood on the edge of certainty. The temporal anomalies had stabilized. The quantum echoes that threatened to unravel our experiments were gone. Every calculation, every feedback loop, every transposed object was exactly where it should be. Celine turned to me, her usual guarded expression softened by exhaustion and awe. "I can't believe it," she said. "All those months of failure, and you solved it in weeks. You really did the impossible." I smiled, but inside, a strange weight settled over me. Science was about discovery, but what we had created went beyond simple understanding. We had effectively mastered the manipulation of time itself. That was a responsibility that could not be taken lightly. She hesitated, then added quietly, "But there's a risk, isn't there? Even now, even with the system stable, someone could misuse this." I nodded. "Yes. And that's why we must protect it. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands." For the first time, our partnership shifted from rivalry and collaboration into something deeper, a shared purpose. We weren't just scientists or inventors. We were guardians of a power far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Celine stepped closer, placing her hand on the console beside mine. Then we proceed cautiously. We document, we secure, we ensure it's never abused. But we also continue exploring, carefully, together. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the determination mirrored in my own reflection. She had doubted me, tried to dissuade me, and challenged every step, but ultimately, it was her intellect, her drive, and her courage that had ensured our success. "I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else," I admitted. She smiled, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. And I suppose I wouldn't either. But promise me, no more risks without discussion. Agreed, I said, shaking my head with a laugh. But you know me, sometimes the first step has to be taken before the discussion happens. We spent the next few days cataloging every experiment, every outcome, and every nuance of the interlink. Every anomaly, every unexpected behavior was recorded. The world outside the lab remained unaware, blissfully ignorant of the revolution quietly unfolding beneath the quantum field. Finally, after months of work, we deactivated the interlink for the first time since its creation. The lab felt ordinary again, almost mundane. But we both knew that the universe had irrevocably shifted. Time itself was no longer a cage, but a landscape we could navigate. Celine turned to me, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the dormant device. "You did it," she said. "You proved that the impossible was just waiting for someone brave enough to try." I nodded. "And you were right to doubt me. Without your skepticism, your challenges, I might have missed something critical. We did this together, even if you didn't realize it at first." She smiled, faint but genuine, the kind that reaches the eyes. "Then I suppose congratulations are in order. For both of us." We stepped out of the lab into the quiet night, the stars shining brightly overhead. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of our achievement, not just the science, but the consequences, the responsibility, and the awe of what we had accomplished. Somewhere out there, in timelines we hadn't yet touched, the ripples of our experiments would continue, subtle but profound. And while the universe might never fully understand what had occurred in that small lab, Celine and I would carry the knowledge and the burden forever. The impossible had been done. And in doing it, we had changed the future, not just of science, but of what humanity could aspire to. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to create something truly monumental. We walked away from the lab together, side by side, knowing that the story of our discovery was only beginning, but that the lesson was clear. When someone tells you it can't be done, maybe they're just waiting for you to do it first.